After my father died, my mother stole my money and gave it to the daughter of my father's cousin, with whom she started living. I always thought my family was normal. Sure, my dad, Daniel, traveled a lot for work, but I never questioned it. My mom, Laura, was a bit distant, but I figured that was just how she was. And then, one night, everything changed. I still remember the exact moment I got the news. It was late in the evening when my mom's phone rang. She answered, and within seconds, her face drained of color. I saw her hands start to tremble, and her breath caught in her throat. Something was wrong. She put the call on speaker, and that's when I heard a woman's voice, sobbing hysterically on the other end. I tried to call an ambulance, but it was too late, the woman wailed. He just collapsed. 1 minute he was fine, and then, he was gone. I frowned. Who was this? And who was gone? Mom's voice was shaky when she spoke. What are you talking about? She asked. The woman on the phone hiccuped through her sobs. Daniel. Your husband. He's dead. For a second, I thought I had misheard her. My dad was supposed to be on a business trip. How could he just die? And why was a strange woman calling us to tell us this? That was the moment my mom's shock turned into suspicion. Who are you? She demanded. The woman hesitated, as if she knew what was coming next. I'm sorry. I know this is horrible, but... I'm Anna. She hesitated before saying the words that would change our lives forever. I was with him when it happened. I was his girlfriend. The silence in our living room was deafening. I felt like the air had been knocked out of my lungs. Girlfriend? Did she just say girlfriend? I looked at my mom, expecting her to scream, to demand an explanation. But she just stood there, gripping the edge of the couch, her face completely blank. Like she was trying to process a reality that shouldn't exist. Anna kept talking, apologizing between sobs. I know this is a shock, but I loved him. I swear I did. We've been together for over 2 years. That was when my mom hung up. We were still in shock when the hospital confirmed it. Dad had died of sudden cardiac arrest. A lifetime of smoking and stress had finally caught up to him. And he had died not at a hotel, not at a work conference, but in the arms of his secret mistress. That night, our house was silent. Mom barely spoke. She just sat in the dim glow of the kitchen light, staring at nothing. And I felt like my entire life had been a lie. My dad wasn't who I thought he was. He wasn't the loyal husband. He wasn't the honest man I believed him to be. At first, I thought Mom was handling it well. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't throw things. Instead, she went cold. And then she started digging. She spent hours, sometimes entire nights, scrolling through Dad's laptop, phone, emails, anything she could find. She went through old text messages, bank records, even the hotel receipts from his so-called work trips. And every time she uncovered something new, she would come to me, her face twisted in fury. Look at this, she'd spit, shoving a printed email in my hands. He was wiring her money. Our money. Thousands of dollars. Then there were the love letters. The pictures. The plane tickets for weekend getaways. My mom became obsessed with uncovering every last detail of his betrayal. And the more she found, the more she talked about it. To me. Constantly. I became the person she vented to. The person she cried to. The person she yelled at when the anger was too much for her to hold inside. I understood why she was mad. I really did. But I was grieving too. And my grief was complicated. I hated what my dad had done. I hated that he had lied to us for years. That he had betrayed my mom. That he had spent thousands of dollars on another woman while we thought he was working. But I also missed him. I missed the dad who came to all my soccer games. Who cheered the loudest at my school plays. Who took me out for ice cream every Saturday, no matter how busy he was. I couldn't just erase those memories. Even if he was a liar. Even if he was a cheater. He had still been my dad. But my mom. She needed me to hate him completely. She needed me to see him as a monster. And I just couldn't do that. And that created a distance between us. A distance that only got worse when Uncle Tony started coming around. Uncle Tony wasn't actually my real uncle. He was my dad's cousin, but we always called him Uncle out of habit. He had been around when I was little, but he moved out of state, so we barely saw him. But after my dad's funeral, he started showing up. A lot. He'd come over to check on us. To help out. At first, I thought nothing of it. It was nice having someone around. Someone who wasn't crushed under the weight of grief and betrayal. Mom leaned on him. A lot. They'd sit on the porch for hours, talking. She'd vent to him. He'd listen. And he always made sure to remind her. You deserve better, Laura. You really do. And maybe she did. Maybe she needed someone who understood her pain. But then. One night, I came home early from practice. I walked inside. And froze in the hallway. Because there, in the dim glow of the living room, was my mother, kissing Uncle Tony. I stood there in the dark hallway, frozen. I wanted to blink. To unsee it. To convince myself that my eyes were playing tricks on me. But they weren't. Because right there, in the glow of the TV, my mom and Uncle Tony were kissing. And not just a casual, friendly kiss. A deep, intimate kiss. My stomach twisted. A hot wave of nausea rolled through me. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. I backed up, stepping carefully so the floorboards wouldn't creak. I couldn't stay. I couldn't face them. So I turned and walked out the front door as quietly as I could. And I ran. I ran until my lungs burned, until my legs felt like they would give out beneath me. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't go home. Not yet. Not after seeing that. When I finally walked back into the house later that night, I pretended nothing had happened. I didn't say a word. And neither did she. She didn't act any different. Didn't seem guilty. Didn't even hesitate when she looked at me. Like she had nothing to hide. Like what I saw was completely normal. But it wasn't normal. It was wrong. And it only got worse from there. Because Uncle Tony kept coming around. More and more. At first, I tried to convince myself it was just a phase. That she was still grieving. That she wasn't thinking straight. That she'd wake up one day and realize what she was doing was messed up. But she never did. And slowly, their relationship stopped being a secret at all. They'd sit too close together. Their conversations would turn into flirty whispers. And one night, I saw Tony walking out of my mom's bedroom. And that's when I knew. This wasn't temporary. This was real. After that, Uncle Tony became a permanent fixture in our home. He wasn't just visiting anymore. He was living there. Sleeping in my dad's old bed. Sitting in my dad's chair. Using my dad's coffee mug. And the worst part? He looked like my dad, too. Not identical. But enough that sometimes, if I saw him from behind, I'd get that brief, cruel moment of hope. Like I was seeing my dad again. But it was never him. It was always Tony. And that made my stomach churn. I couldn't understand it. How did we go from hating my dad's betrayal to this? To my mom replacing him with his own cousin? To her pretending like this wasn't disgusting and wrong? She spent months ripping my dad apart. Calling him a cheater, a liar, a disgrace. And now she was sleeping with his cousin? What did that make her? I wanted to scream at her. To call her out for her hypocrisy. To tell her she was no better than my dad was. But I didn't. Because I knew she wouldn't care. I kept my mouth shut and waited for the day I could leave. I threw myself into school, into work, into planning my escape. Because that's what it felt like. I wasn't just leaving home for college. I was escaping this nightmare. The one thing that gave me peace of mind was knowing I had my college fund. My dad had told me about it for years. This money is for you, he would say. No matter what happens, I want you to have the future you deserve. So when the time came, I sat my mom down and told her I was ready to access it. I'll never forget the look on her face. It wasn't surprise. It was guilt. Like she had been dreading this conversation. That's when I knew. Something was wrong. She shifted uncomfortably in her chair, avoiding my eyes. Then she sighed and said, "Sweetheart. I was hoping you wouldn't bring that up." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. "What do you mean?" I asked. She hesitated. Then she said the words that made my blood turn to ice. "The money's gone." I stared at her. "Gone? What do you mean gone?" She let out a long breath, like this was so hard for her. "I had to make a decision," she said carefully. "Hannah needed help paying for college. You know how hard Tony has worked as a single dad. It was only right to help her out." Hannah. Uncle Tony's daughter. My cousin. I felt my entire body go numb. "You gave my college fund to Hannah?" She didn't even look guilty when she nodded. "You have so many opportunities, sweetheart. You're smart, you work hard. You can find a way to make it work. Hannah didn't have the same chances." I thought. I didn't even let her finish. I stood up so fast my chair nearly toppled over. "Are you joking?" I snapped. "Dad saved that money for me. He wanted me to have that future. Not Hannah. Not Uncle Tony. Me." She rolled her eyes, like I was being dramatic. "You'll be fine, sweetheart. You can take out loans, get a part-time job. That's not the point." I shouted. I could feel my hands shaking with rage. This was my dad's money. He worked for this. And you just gave it away? That's when her face hardened. "Your dad was a cheater," she snapped. "You need to stop acting like he was some saint. He didn't care about this family. He threw it all away for some cheap fling. So excuse me if I don't care about his money." I could barely breathe. I felt like I had just been punched in the gut. This wasn't just stealing my college fund. This was erasing my dad completely. She had rewritten history to make him the villain. While she sat there playing the victim. But I wasn't buying it. Not anymore. That was the moment I stopped seeing her as my mother. And started seeing her for who she really was. A selfish, greedy hypocrite who had no problem ruining my life to make hers easier. I took a deep breath. Then I said something that changed everything. "If you try to take another cent of what's mine, I will sue you." She laughed at first. But when I didn't back down, the laughter died in her throat. She knew I wasn't bluffing. And for the first time, she looked afraid. I wasn't the scared, obedient kid she had controlled for years. I was done being silent. I was done letting her walk all over me. I was done being her victim. This was war. I don't know what I expected after that fight. Maybe that she'd feel guilty. Maybe that she'd at least pretend to regret what she had done. But no. Instead, she doubled down. She told me I was selfish. That I was ungrateful. That I was just like my father, as if that was some horrible insult. "You need to stop acting like you're entitled to everything, Evelyn," she spat, arms crossed. "Tony and Hannah are family too. If I choose to help them, that's my right." My blood boiled. "You didn't help them. You stole from me. From Dad." She rolled her eyes, like I was being dramatic. "Stop acting like a victim. You have a job, you can take out loans. You'll be fine." I stared at her, jaw clenched so tight it hurt. I wasn't going to win this argument. She didn't care about me. She never had. And she never would. After that, I stopped trying. I stopped talking to her unless I had to. I stopped eating meals with her and Tony. I started spending more time at school, working extra shifts at my part-time job. Because every second in that house felt like I was drowning. I didn't belong there. Not anymore. And they knew it too. Tony especially. At first, he tried to act like a father figure. Tried to give me advice. Tried to tell me I should be grateful for everything my mom had done for me. I ignored him. And that must have pissed him off, because soon after, he stopped pretending to be nice. He started making rules. "If you live under this roof, you contribute. We're a family now, and families help each other out." He tried to force me to do extra chores, to help with bills, to babysit Hannah whenever she was home from school. And I refused. Because I wasn't part of that family. I was just a tenant, waiting for the day I could leave. And that day finally came. The second I got my acceptance letter, I started packing my bags. I didn't tell my mom. I didn't tell Tony. I didn't tell anyone. Because I knew if I did, they'd try to stop me. I had barely enough money to cover my first semester. But I was willing to figure it out on my own. Anything was better than staying in that house another day. So the night before I was supposed to leave, I sat down with my mom one last time. I looked her in the eye and said, "I hope Hannah was worth it." She frowned, confused. "What are you talking about? You gave her everything that was supposed to be mine. My college fund. My security. My future. So I hope she was worth it." She sighed, rubbing her temples. "Evelyn, don't be so dramatic. I told you. I don't care what you told me." I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. "I just want you to remember this moment. Because the next time you need something from me, I won't be here." She didn't even react. She just waved me off, muttering something under her breath. Like I was just being childish. Like this was just another tantrum she could ignore. That was the last conversation we had for years. I left the next morning. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't look back. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. College wasn't easy. I had to work 2 jobs to afford rent and food. There were nights I went to bed starving. Days I was so exhausted I thought I'd collapse. But I never regretted leaving. Not once. Because at least I was struggling on my own terms. At least I wasn't trapped in that house of liars and thieves. And in the end, it all paid off. I graduated. I got a job. And eventually, I built a life where I didn't have to worry about money anymore. Where I didn't have to answer to anyone. Where I was completely independent. And in those years, my mom never called. Never texted. Never reached out. It was like I had never existed to her. And honestly, I was fine with that. 5 years passed before I heard from her again. I was at work when my phone started buzzing. A number I didn't recognize. I hesitated for a second before answering. And the second I did, I regretted it. Because as soon as I picked up, I heard her voice. "Evelyn. Finally, you pick up. I've been trying to call you for days." I froze in my chair. She sounded desperate. Panicked. Not at all like the woman who had thrown me away like I was nothing. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice cold. She didn't even hesitate. "I need your help." Of course she did. She told me she had been in a car accident. That she had broken her leg and couldn't work. That she was struggling to pay her medical bills. And she needed me to send her $700 a month until she could get back on her feet. I laughed. I actually laughed out loud. Because this was exactly what I knew would happen. She had thrown me away when I wasn't useful to her. And now that she was broke and helpless, she wanted me to step up. Absolutely not. "Ask Tony," I said flatly. There was a long silence. Then a bitter laugh. "Tony left," she admitted. "We broke up 2 years ago." "Oh. Oh, that was rich." "Guess you backed the wrong horse," I said, my voice dripping with amusement. "I did everything for you, Evelyn," she snapped. "I raised you. I gave you a home. And now you're just going to let me suffer?" "You didn't do any of that for me," I shot back. "You did it because it was your job. The second you had a choice, you gave everything to Tony and Hannah and left me with nothing. And now you expect me to care? To fix your mistakes? I'm your mother," she yelled. "And where were you when I needed a mother?" Silence. For the first time in her life, she had nothing to say. So I hung up. Blocked her number. And went back to work like nothing happened. Because as far as I was concerned, she wasn't my mother anymore. She hadn't been for a long time. And now? She was just another stranger looking for a handout. And I don't give money to strangers. Hanging up on her should have been the end of it. I should have been able to go back to my life, my peace, my freedom. But of course, my mother never knew when to quit. For the next 2 weeks, she tried everything to reach me. She left voicemails that started off pathetic. "Evelyn, please. I'm in so much pain. I can't afford my medication. I don't know what to do. Just help me, okay? Just this once. Then she moved on to guilt-tripping. I sacrificed everything for you. And now you won't even help your own mother? What kind of daughter does that? And finally, when she realized I wasn't budging, she got angry. You're a selfish brat. Just like your father. After everything I've done for you, you treat me like this? Fine. I don't need you. Don't bother calling me when you realize what a terrible person you are. I didn't respond to a single message. I didn't answer a single call. She had made her bed. She could lie in it. But then, she brought Tony and Hannah into it. One morning, my phone lit up with a text from a number I hadn't seen in years. Hannah. Hey Evelyn. I know we haven't talked in a while, but I really think you should hear Mom out. She's struggling, and she needs you. Mom? She was calling my mother Mom now. I laughed. Of course. Of course, she'd suddenly care now that her free ride was over. I ignored her. 2 days later. Uncle Tony called. I stared at the screen for a solid minute before answering, just to hear what he had to say. Evelyn, it's been a long time, he said smoothly, like we were old friends. Yeah, not long enough, I replied. He sighed. Look, I get it. You're upset. But at the end of the day, Laura is still your mother. I nearly choked on my coffee. She wasn't my mother when she gave my college fund to your daughter. Silence. Then, he had the audacity to say. Look, things didn't work out between me and her. But she's in a bad place. I've helped as much as I can, but I have my own responsibilities. You're doing well now, right? You can afford to help. I let out a slow breath. Tony, let me ask you something. If she were doing fine, would she have reached out to me? More silence. Because we both knew the answer. I hung up. And blocked his number too. But Mom still didn't stop. I had no choice but to teach her a lesson. I wrote a post on Facebook. A long, detailed post explaining everything. How she stole my college fund. How she gave it to her boyfriend's daughter instead. How she cut me off for years. And how she was now begging me for money after ruining my life. I laid it all out. I named names. I didn't hold back. And within hours, the entire family knew the truth. My phone started blowing up. Aunt Kathy called me, demanding to know if what I wrote was true. Cousins I hadn't talked to in ages sent me messages saying, I always knew your mom was selfish, but this is unbelievable. Even my mom's own sister commented on the post. I had no idea you did this to Evelyn, Laura. This is disgusting. Mom? She lost it. She left comment after comment. Calling me a liar. Screaming that I was trying to ruin her life. Saying I was twisting the truth. But no one believed her. Because everything I said made too much sense. And for the first time, she wasn't in control of the story anymore. She called me over and over, but I didn't answer. Finally, she left me one last voicemail. Her voice was shaky, furious. You have no idea what you've done. I hope you're happy, Evelyn. Because I'm done with you. And that was it. She never called again. A month passed. And then, one night, I got home from work, and she was there. Sitting on the steps in front of my house. Waiting for me. I froze in place. For the first time in years, I actually saw her. She looked different. Older. Weaker. Like life had finally caught up to her. She saw me and immediately started crying. I'm so sorry, Evelyn, she sobbed. I know I messed up. I know I was a terrible mother. But I'm sick. I have nowhere else to go. I just need a little help, just until I get back on my feet. I stared at her. She looked so small sitting there. So broken. For a brief second, I felt something almost like pity. But then, I remembered all the times I begged her to care. I remembered all the times she chose Tony and Hannah over me. I remembered how she only called me when she needed something. And just like that, the pity vanished. Go to Hannah, I said. Her face crumpled. Evelyn, please. I shook my head. Go to Tony. Ask him for money. Or better yet, figure it out yourself. Just like I had to. Her expression changed in an instant. The tears dried up. Her eyes turned cold. You're cruel, she spat. You think you're so much better than me, don't you? Well, one day, you're going to need help. And no one will be there for you. I laughed. That's funny. Because I've needed help before, and guess what? You weren't there for me. So why should I be there for you now? She just stared at me. Like she couldn't believe she wasn't winning this time. Like she had no idea who I was anymore. Finally, she stood up. You're going to regret this, she said. I shrugged. I doubt it. She turned. She walked away. And this time, I knew she wouldn't be back. I never heard from her again. No calls. No texts. Nothing. And honestly, it was a relief. I finally had peace. I had my own life, a life I built with no help from her. And I was happy. Because at the end of the day, family isn't about blood. It's about who is there for you when it matters. And she had never been there. So I wasn't going to be there for her either. Not now. Not ever. Thank you for watching the video. Like it if you watched the video to the end and don't forget to subscribe. Have a nice day.